5 kids and peace. Welcome. We're taking another look into the life and message of Elisabeth Elliot, who called us to live to a higher standard each day and not be satisfied with second best. As our series continues in the coming weeks, we'll hear from family, friends, and others who were influenced by Elisabeth's life and her message. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We continue our series called Love Has a Price Tag. Joining us will be Elisabeth's granddaughter, Elisabeth Martin, and she'll give us some of her impressions about her grandmother's talk. Have you ever been hesitant to do something? Maybe, for instance, when it came to your family, hesitant about having any children. Some thoughts on that and an ordered home, with peace, but still with laughter and fun, as we hear the tale of an ordered home.
Our talk yesterday was about love having a price tag. Sacrifice always has to be a part of love. Last night, my daughter Valerie called to tell me that she had been asked by some newlyweds about the possibility of having children, and the only reason that they were hesitant was that they couldn't really believe that it was possible to have an ordered home and well-behaved children. And I guess that's one reason for the hesitation of a good many young married couples. They've seen what chaos there is in some even Christian homes, and little kids who just turn into uncontrolled demons, and they think, oh, that's not for me, that's not my scene. Well, Valerie's answer, of course, was yes, it is possible to have an ordered home and well-behaved children, but it is going to cost you something. Is it possible to have 6 children and peace? Well, yes, it is. Valerie has 6 children, and I would say their home is an ordered and relatively peaceful place. That doesn't mean that the children are suppressed. They have fun, and there's a lot of laughter, but generally speaking, there is order. But I wanted to tell you the story of another home in which there were 5 kids and peace. It was one autumn afternoon that I was going to be a guest in this home, and I arrived in the late afternoon. It was a large white house set back from the road with beautiful big trees and a beautiful lawn. As I was ushered into the back door and into the kitchen, I could smell beef stew and wood smoke. The mother of the family, whose name is Arlita, took me into the living room where there were 2 boys lying on their stomachs on the floor playing a game. She said, "Boys, I want you to meet Mrs. Leach." My name was Mrs. Leach back at that time. That was my second husband's name. Well, these boys, mind you, lying on their stomachs on the floor playing a game, immediately jumped to their feet, came forward with smiles and outstretched hands. Arlita and I went back to the kitchen. She was making some biscuits. She set me to work cutting apples, and the boys were setting the table. There were 4 boys and 1 girl in the family. Different ones were doing different tasks. Somebody was pouring milk in the glasses. Somebody was carrying food back and forth to the dining room. And finally it was dinner time. Arlita called the family. We went into this beautiful dining room with a huge round table. And as we sat down, everyone clasped hands for grace. It was very interesting to watch the conversation. Everyone participated. The subjects were schoolwork, the church, the neighbors, my old house where I had lived just a few blocks away from this one, math, scripture. But I was most amazed that the children paid attention to the guest and seemed to consider themselves members of the entertainment committee. They didn't leave it up to their parents to see to it that I had more water, or the butter, or the jam, or the biscuits. They passed things to me. They asked if they could get me something. Was this a model family? Well, don't ever forget that every family is a model of something. What kind of a model does your family present? Chaos or cosmos? Those are two Greek words. I think you know what chaos means. Cosmos is a word that simply means order, as in the ordered universe. At the end of the meal, we continued to sit around the table while they sang some songs, some Bible songs, gospel songs, which I didn't know, but everybody else knew all the words and the music. They sang lustily, and then the father read the Bible, and he went around the room asking each person if he had a prayer request. I was amazed to hear the requests. One little boy, only, I suppose, 7 or 8 years old, requested prayer for a non-Christian neighbor. When the meal was over, Arlita and Joe invited me to come into a little sitting room where there was a fire burning, a fire that one of the boys had laid. And as we sat by the fire, I could hear the distant clink of dishes. Then I could hear a piano being practiced and a flute somewhere upstairs. There were voices. I could hear children moving about. But there were no interruptions to our adult conversation. When's the last time you've been in a home where there were children and no interruptions when the adults were trying to have conversations? There was no strife. And finally, even the clinking of the dishes and the music practicing was over, and there was silence. Joe and Arlita and I had time to sit quietly by the fire and discuss many things which were of interest to us. And finally, noticing the silence, I turned to Arlita and I said, "Where are the children?" And she said, "What time is it?" Well, I said, "It's 10:15. And she said, "Well, then they're in bed." I said, "You mean to tell me they went to bed without a word being said by either of you?" And Joe and Arlita looked at each other and laughed. Well, yes, of course. There was no wheedling. There were no threats, no pleas, no negotiating, and no final capitulation. I've been in many a home where the process of getting the children to bed at night was more or less the matter of the entire evening. And so I said to them, "Well, how did you do it? How have you created a home of such peace and order?" Well, they looked a little bit baffled, as if nobody had ever asked them a question like that. They looked at each other, and finally Joe said, "You know, I don't want to hate my kids." He said, "Arlita and I sat down before these children were born and talked about what kind of a home we wanted to have. And he said, the last thing I want to do is to hate my kids, but if I had to wheedle and plead and threaten and negotiate every night to get them into bed and go through the same routine every morning to get them out of bed and down to breakfast, well, quite frankly, I think I'd hate my kids." Well, Saturday morning breakfast, Arlita said it will be at 7:30. So at 7:30, I was on my way down the stairs and to my astonishment saw that Joe and Arlita were also on their way downstairs. But I could smell sausage and fried apples, and we went into the dining room, and there it was, not only set, but the food was on the table. Sausages, fried apples, scrambled eggs, coffee cake, orange juice, and coffee. The kids had done the whole job. They had done the whole job in about 15 minutes, because somebody had organized who was going to do what, and it was not Arlita that had done the organizing. I was really stunned. I said to Arlita, I said, "Does the system ever break down?" "Yes, of course it does," she said. "There are lapses. We have company now, so maybe they're showing off a little bit for company, but generally speaking," she said, "they do pretty well." "What do you do when there are lapses?" I said. "Well, we withdraw a privilege. But generally speaking, they're pretty well adjusted and pretty happy." Now, what about work time? How much time does each person spend working? Well, they said each child has his own routine jobs, such as making his bed and cleaning his room and cleaning the bathroom. But then we have a lot of other jobs that are not routine, things like washing windows and chopping wood and raking the lawn, things that are not done every day. And we write those jobs out on a list in the kitchen. We hang that list up, and the children can come in, choose the jobs that they want to do, fill out a 3x5 describing the job, do the job, and they put on the 3x5 the number of hours that it has taken them to do the job. They then have to get one of the parents to see that the job was done right. If it was, the parent initials the card. If it was not, the child had to do the job over again on his own time, of course. At the end of the month, the 3x5 cards are turned in, and the parents pay the children according to the going rate if they had had to hire a professional to do that job. And they said, last month we paid for 125 hours of special jobs done. So the responsibility is real. The children learned how to handle money as well as time. Stravinsky, in his book The Poetics of Music, refers to the anguish into which an unrestricted freedom plunges me. I see children who really signal anguish in their lives because they have been given unrestricted freedom. The route to real freedom and liberation is obedience, submission to rules, order.
The Gateway to Joy program, Love Has a Price Tag, 5 Kids and Peace. Elisabeth Martin is one of the grandchildren of Elisabeth Elliot, and she joins us to give some of her thoughts on these 2 programs that we'll have today. Elisabeth?
She gave some really practical advice. I love that people could write to her and get a response. She did have Jan help her answer all the letters, but she really did get 500 letters a month. That blows my mind. I mean, nobody sends that kind of mail anymore, but they probably send that many emails, if not more. How to get untangled. She was giving an illustration of a very peaceful home she saw where there were 5 children and they were all very well behaved and everything ran very smoothly. What she didn't see was all the stuff that happened when she wasn't there visiting. So I have a feeling it wasn't completely peaceful the whole time, but that's just my imagination. She says, finish one job at a time. Well, that works really well for most people, but I must say for myself, I'm a kind of person who has multiple things going at the same time. I don't always get a task finished, and she probably would have just despaired over our house and how we run things. But I like that she does say you can do laundry and dishes as spiritual work because they can be offered to the Lord. I would add that you can also offer up your very own brain and your personality to Him because we are different, all of us. And there are different strokes for different folks. There are different ways of doing these kinds of things. But we know that making lists and schedules are very important. I like that she talked about drinking water, moving around a bit, doing something practical first thing in the morning. But I love that she says you can peel potatoes and pray. So if you don't get that holy devotional time alone, you can still pray and peel potatoes. This is really good advice. I love that she talks about the serenity of Jesus, moving from one person or task or place to another with peace. That is such a good example to us, because I am so often rushing, and I realize that is not the position of peace. That's not the place of peace.
Elisabeth Martin, one of the granddaughters of Elisabeth Elliot. She'll be back with us again in just a little bit. But first, it's part 4 of Love Has a Price Tag. How can you get untangled in life? How about some advice for a busy mother of 3 boys? How can she get untangled?
Yesterday, I described an ordered home. The title of my talk was 5 Kids and Peace. And I told about a visit to a home where there were 5 children. I think the oldest was 16, the youngest was about 7 or 8. And it was very peaceful and very ordered, and things seemed to run on oiled wheels. Recently, I had a letter from a lady who was the mother of 3 boys and the wife of a doctor, and she said that she enjoys the program very much, but in large letters in the middle of the first page, she says, "I am frantic. Please help me. When my youngest entered first grade, I hoped I could get more together with my thoughts and emotions. For years, 5 o'clock in the morning was my quiet and devotional time, for it was the only uninterrupted time I had. Often my mind was bleary, but devotions were meaningful, sometimes more than others. Now I've found I am clearer and can communicate with God more around 9 or 10 a.m., but by the time I get home from school, it's 9 a.m. and hard to get started again. It seems I need so much solitude I can't get enough, and I hunger to study God's Word and pray. But I know He expects me to joyfully do these homemaking tasks too. Well, I can't get unmuddled. Further on down, she says, "Can you give me help on devotions and homemaking approach? If I do them later, I run out of time. If I study, I don't get to the home duties except dishes and laundry. I can't exercise regularly. I can't pray with my husband or do personal things. I can't get untangled. I stay tired. Please reply soon." Well, that poor lady. My heart went out to her, and so did Jan's. And I need to explain here that Jan Anderson is the one who takes care of the letters. And if we get as many as 500 letters in a month, you can understand that it would be quite impossible for either Jan or me to do all of them. And so Jan answered this letter for me. She does a good job, and this was the gist of her reply. Jan suggested that she use the 20-minute car trip home from school to pray. And then she said, finish one job at a time before going on to the next one. That's really good advice. If you're like me and you have 16 different things to do at once, it's a temptation to do a little bit of one thing and then go and do a little bit of another thing. That's not the way to get through things. Finish one job at a time. She reminded this dear lady that her calling is to be a wife and a mother, and that she need not separate what she calls the spiritual activities from the secular. The laundry and the dishes, some might think of as secular work. God thinks of them as spiritual work if they are offered to Him. I keep talking about offering up every experience. I would urge you to offer up every task to Jesus, and even the tasks which seem odious and distasteful can be gateways to joy. One thing that I am sure of is that it does help to make lists. And by all means, put on the list time for quiet. If you don't schedule it, it probably isn't going to happen. You've got to exercise discipline in keeping to a schedule. But if you have it down on paper, then you can at least aim at that. When there are emergencies and interruptions from the children that cannot be avoided, remember that God knows all about that. But God is not the author of confusion. How many of us feel a bit bleary when we get up in the morning to have quiet time? I always drink 2 glasses of water before I go into my study and sit down with my Bible and try to do my praying. I feel kind of bleary too, but it does help to get up and move around a little bit. Maybe it would help some of you to get dressed, maybe empty the dishwasher, make some coffee. Then, if you don't get all the time that you want for your quiet time, remember that you can peel potatoes and pray, or iron and pray. I would hope that at least sometime during the day you can get alone again and just kneel, maybe even for a minute or two, and open your hands and offer your confusion up to the Lord. Ask Him for help. Then receive it in your open hands, and then wait quietly. A good way to conduct a quiet time is to find a place to be by yourself. And I think it helps to kneel, just because kneeling is not a very comfortable position and you're not so likely to go to sleep. Sit down and read. Read a short passage in the Bible if you only have a short time, and think about it. I think it's better to read 2 verses and let them sink deeply into your heart than it is to try to race through 2 chapters just in order to be able to tell yourself that you read 2 chapters. If you've never had a quiet time, I would suggest that you start with one of the Gospels. The shortest one is Mark. Try reading the Gospel of Mark. Notice how Jesus lived and moved among people. Notice his serenity. The very first chapter of Mark has quite a lot of activity in it, and yet there's something serene about the way Jesus moves from one person to another, from one task to another, from one place to another. There's no hurry or flurry or bustle or frustration or discontent. Make your list for the day in God's presence. That helps me. I always have a little pad of paper with me next to my Bible, and I write things down while I'm praying. For one thing, so that I can be finished with them and not keep thinking, I wonder if I'm going to remember that. I put it right down on a piece of paper. I don't think God minds that kind of an interruption. After you've listed everything that you know needs to be done, then list them according to priority. In other words, rearrange your list. Do the first thing that needs to be done. Put the first thing first and do the first thing first. Work out a plan to get your house straightened up. Which room is the worst? Is it the utility room? Does everything sort of get junked into the utility room and there's no rhyme nor reason to what's there? Well, start on that. Take out everything that doesn't belong in the utility room and put it where it does belong. Clean up the top of the washing machine and the dryer. Try to get down in the cracks between them and behind them. Is it the garage that needs to be cleaned? Well, the garage is pretty big. You probably can't clean that in one day. But take one side of the garage. Straighten up the tools or straighten up the shelves. If you haven't got time for that, take one shelf per day. Can you do that in 10 minutes? I would hope so. How about that top dresser drawer? That place where you have all that messy makeup. Makeup that you don't use anymore. Throw it away. Hairbrushes, clean them out. Put them to soak in some ammonia. Dirty powder puffs, wash them. Tackle one thing that you're sure you can finish. Today, the day that I prepared this talk, I dumped out my plastic makeup tray. That little plastic tray with the compartments in it, and I put the thing in the dishwasher. Got rid of all the stuff in it that was no good anymore. This is one way of practicing the presence of God in your work. I can hear somebody out there saying, "Come on, do you mean to tell me that God cares what the top drawer of your dresser looks like?" Yes, I mean to tell you that. I really believe that God is interested in the little things in our lives, because if we're not ordered in the little things, if you don't have the bobby pins in one section of the tray, it might just be an indication that you're not ordered in some much more important things than bobby pins. Those 3 or 4 hours alone that this lady who wrote the letter told us she had, not very many of you have 3 or 4 hours alone, do you? She said she had 3 or 4 hours alone 3 days a week. She wanted to do work specifically for the Lord. Maybe she's forgetting that when you work for others, you can be offering that as a task for the Lord too. Your family comes first, and what you do for your family, you can do for the Lord, because he said, "Remember, inasmuch as you have done it for one of the least of these my brothers, you have done it unto me." Teach your children what order means by taking a Saturday morning to help them organize their drawers, their closets, their toys. Get them to appreciate the relief that it is to find things. The rule should be a place for everything, and everything in its place. That's not easy, especially if you have cramped quarters. That may mean that you need to throw out some things. And part of bringing order into our lives is getting rid of the extraneous things, isn't it? Spiritually as well as physically. In God's mind, there is no dichotomy between the spiritual and the physical. Everything is meant to be offered to Him.
Love Has a Price Tag, Part 4, How to Get Untangled. Joining us again, Elisabeth Martin. She is giving us some insights on her grandmother's talks on Gateway to Joy. Elisabeth, what struck you as you thought about these two programs that we've had today?
This episode, she tells about how to rearrange your list, doing the first thing that needs to be done, getting it done, working out a plan for tidying and decluttering and organizing. Which room is the worst? I'm not sure I want to start with the room that's the worst, but that's just me. But that's her style. I love that she says family comes first. Totally agree with that. And inasmuch as you have done it for the least of these, my brothers, you have done it for me. We can do all the things for Jesus. All the ways of serving our family can be done for him. And she talks about how to help your children appreciate the relief it is to find things. How often do we lose stuff in the house because it hasn't got a place? So in our house, we have nomadic items. We have items that move from place to place because they haven't actually got a home. And so I've found some real help in a lady who has a podcast called A Slob Comes Clean. Dana K. White, she's written books, really has helped me. My granny's words, everything in its place, a place for everything and everything in its place. Well, if you don't actually have a place for everything, then you've got to start somewhere. All that aside, though, everything is meant to be offered to the Lord. She says, get rid of the extraneous things, the extraneous spiritual things and the extraneous physical stuff that weighs us down. I think of that verse, let us throw off every weight that hinders us. And that can be just basic sin, but it can also be the weights of things we hold on to, stuff we hold on to, and also spiritual things we can hold on to because we haven't yet given it up to the Lord.
Elisabeth Martin, granddaughter of Elisabeth Elliot. Hey, it's been great to hear from some of you as we've had our listener comment line available. And it's actually pretty easy to find. If you go to elisabethelliot.org, it'll be on the main page. Just scroll down and you'll see the Share a Message section. So look for the podcast and the Share a Message section. Get out your phone and put in elisabethelliot.org. And then on the main page, find Share a Message and leave a thought for us. We'll have some information on the show notes as well. Well, as our time together comes to an end once again, thanks for letting us come into your home. Maybe along with you as you drove around town or got some exercise wherever we found you. And on behalf of the Elisabeth Elliot Foundation, in cooperation with the Bible Broadcasting Network, let me invite you to check out the Gateway to Joy programs, devotionals, or other resources too at elisabethelliot.org. Until next time, may God remind you each day, you are loved with an everlasting love, and underneath are the everlasting arms